Well, hello everybody. My name is Lamar Blackman, and the title of this YouTube video is Math and How to Understand It. And I created a little quick outline here. I spent about 30 seconds to a minute creating this outline. My main point is I didn't spend a lot of time in this discussion today because I'm gonna let it come all off the top, which is the way it should be. Real quickly, excuse me. The purpose for this video is that I do attend a Father's house in Norcross, and I had several people ask me about tutoring them in mathematics. It came from a testimony of my background in that and my background in engineering, and I can share a little bit about that with you right now. Let's start back in terms of my background. First of all, my background is I went to Georgia. I started off in college in 2001 at Georgia Southern. Okay, and I started there in a program called RATB, Regents Transfer Program, to Georgia Tech. And what happened there was I was supposed to take the math and science classes and then a couple of the other electives, and then transfer to Georgia Tech to finish the engineering courses, which I did. And so what happened was my first year of college, in terms of the math stuff, I took calculus my first semester. Second semester I took calculus 2 and calculus-based physics, which is the second semester. I was still 18 years old. By the end of that semester, the professor was impressed with my scores and actually hired me as a tutor in physics. And I was the youngest tutor ever hired at that school for that program. And I went on to tutor physics, and I started tutoring calculus 1. I tutored calculus 2, calculus 3. I tutored linear algebra, differential equations, statistics, all the way up through. I also had a chance to take a graduate level advanced ordinary differential equations class as well, which I also got an A in that class. But the main thing is that a lot of things happen in terms of my success in mathematics. I also had a chance to compete in several competitions. In one of them I had the highest score on record at Georgia Southern. In terms of, actually I tied that with a senior that was there. In my sophomore year, I tied it with a previous senior who was at the college, who was a math major. But anyway, in another competition that we got honorable mention, which is a national title for the mathematical modeling competition, where we had to model a certain project or whatever using mathematics and all that good stuff. What am I trying to say? I'm telling you a little bit about my background so you can understand how to understand mathematics and what happened to me. One of the reasons why I did well in college is because I had now if I go back to high school, talk to you about high school, I just know I was making A's in those classes. I didn't realize how good I was at mathematics until my senior year, when I started looking back and saying, hey, I got A's and everything, and I was getting all these tests back, and there was 50 out of 50, 49 out of 50, 50 out of 50, and I was like, oh, okay. Then I looked back at my report card and realized I had straight A's in math. I mean, I was always a A and B student in high school, not straight A's, but I didn't realize I was getting straight A's in math and how high those scores were. So I took that application, but I took physics, which was it was an honors physics class, because the teacher made it a little bit more difficult for us. We had to write these huge papers, but he used me as almost like the teacher for that class. Every time someone else gave a report on something, he would call me for it to fill in the gaps. So I had to understand my own project and also understand enough about somebody else's project to help them out. And he saw me as a go-to person, which really, I mean, I was an A and B student. Well, I saw myself as average, but he believed in me, and so I took that, and I got more intense. I started believing in myself a lot better. And then I went on to college, and I thought, if high school physics was like that, college is going to be 10 times harder, and I don't want to fail. I'm so scared. I studied so hard in that physics class that I actually came out number 1 in that class, and therefore earned that job where I was paid as a tutor for that college, and that led me to tutor other things. And by the way, I was paid for 2 hours of tutoring twice a week, but I oftentimes tutored for 4 or 5 hours the rest of the time without pay, because I enjoyed it so much. So I had a passion for it. A couple things about that. Now you understand my background. Let me make sure I cover my notes correctly. I talked about 1, 2, and blah, 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 blah. So yeah, you heard a little bit about the competitions, and then I transferred to Georgia Tech, and that thing continued on. Now I never was paid to tutor at Georgia Tech, but I volunteered. I tutored all the math classes I mentioned to you. I tutored mathematical modeling classes like MATLAB. I tutored dynamics, rigid body dynamics. I tutored thermodynamics. I actually tutored thermodynamics at Georgia Southern. I had about 30 people that will participate in that training total between all the things I was teaching. And I tutored that class as well. So I ended up tutoring almost everything. I was taking a lot of these classes at the same time I was tutoring them. And I learned to solve many problems and understand why people ask certain questions and things like that. Now I've told you my story. I'm going to pick some things that you got from that hopefully you picked up from my story. And one thing I didn't share with you is that the mindset of the people that I was teaching or teaching. Now I had I guess above average SAT scores, but they still weren't all that great. But I was tutoring people at the time. It was the highest score was 1600. There were some people that had 1500 SAT scores or 1540 SAT scores, and still was in my tutoring class. And my question was, why are you in this tutoring class with such a high test scores and all this other stuff? Well, it turns out to be more than that. See, when it comes to mathematics, most of the students that came in there and asked questions about math said a couple things to me. They would say, you know what? Teach me everything. I know nothing. That's how they would enter into the class. And they thought it was funny. They tell me, you know what, my whole background I never liked math. I never did well in math. In high school, I was almost my favorite, my most feared subject. My parents weren't good enough to help me in math. So I was kind of, I did so. Now I got to do it in order to do this in college. I mean, that's just some examples. That's how they would start off. And I had some that literally gave up. They dropped the Georgia Tech transfer program and stayed at Georgia Southern to finish up on something a little bit easier for themselves. The reason why they did that, because they was afraid of the math, and they figured the math was going to get harder and all that. So we have a lot of people out here who never made it to their profession, whether it's engineering, whether it's being a lawyer, whether it's being I don't know what type of background, whether it was some type of one of the sciences like chemistry or physics major or something like that, because they were afraid of the math. Or maybe it was some other degree that they would looked at the electives that were required and say, you know what, we have to take this math class, I have to take this math class, and they literally would choose something easier to avoid the math. And they changed their whole financial future and their whole destiny in terms of business and in terms of relationships that they would have created had they stuck in the other profession that they actually would have enjoyed doing. They felt like they had a purpose to do that type of thing. And so one of the things I want to attack right now that I taught the students was the first thing you have to attack is your mindset about math. You have to start speaking that you understand math, that math comes simple to me. I mean, recently I had somebody ask me about tutoring them or tutoring their child, and then that person didn't know what class that child was in, and that child didn't know the name of the class. And so I mentioned to her, and this is a high school student. I mean, you have to at least know the name of that class, and you have to know what's on the syllabus, and you have to understand the titles of what you're learning. Even if you don't understand how to do, some type of quotient or something like that, you need to at least know, there is something called a quotient. There's something called that, and then you may not know how to do it. You may not know how to deal with fractions, but you should know that the word fraction and at least what it means. I mean, study the vocabulary, study the terms so you know what you're trying to learn. Show some input and some effort to learning these things rather than just throwing it up. I remember walking by one of the students' classes I was tutoring in college, and I stopped to just stare at her to see what she was doing. This is why the teacher was studying. I was outside the classroom. Nobody knew somebody probably knew I was looking, but I didn't care. I was looking at her. And I saw her looking at her eyes up at the ceiling. I mean, I'm not exaggerating. She was like this, looking around, and she looked out the window. And my wife was a testimony. She was there with me. All right, she saw this too. She was laughing because this is a person that I'm tutoring, and they're like eyes all over the place. And what happens, excuse me, if you analyze this, what happens is their mind cuts off. They shut their mind down so that whatever somebody's teaching, they don't spend enough energy and focus into listening anyway. So what your professor or your teacher in school is teaching you, you're not going to receive. You have to start believing you can do this. You have to believe that. Speak it. Say, you know what, math comes easy to me. The Bible says that. First of all, it says speak that which isn't as if it were. Alright, then also it says, let the redeemed of the Lord say so. So you say so. Say, I'm good in math. This is not theory. This is a reality. Alright, this is reality. You can make this thing work. I've seen it work in people's lives. I'm good at mathematics. Math comes easy to me. I spend some time doing the homework and everything. Once I get the homework, I ace the test. Man, it's a piece of cake. Rather than speaking negatively and bragging about it like most people do, you know what I'm saying? They smile and laugh, and then, and they're hiding behind something as well with that. But you have to start there first. Once you start there, then somebody can work with you. Otherwise, you're really wasting the tutor's time. And I know it might sound strong or blunt with you, but really that's what's happening, because even if they break it down to you, I've seen folks shut down so bad till they probably wouldn't be able to answer their middle name. I mean, they just shut off. Their eyes is glazed over. I mean, they're just dead to the world because you're so far over their head, and they just keep telling you, oh man, you're over my head, and I don't get this, and oh man, I knew I shouldn't took this class. Blah 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 blah. Well, I'm investing my time as a tutor to help you. Please listen. Please take a step back and do that. Alright, so that's something that you want to look at also. The other thing is that you want to look at confidence. And once you start to do this for yourself, you want to gain confidence and use confidence as an energy for yourself. I mean, when you have confidence about something, you jump into it and everything tends to just come together. And I've been doing this for a while in terms of the way I do my job. I've had as an engineering contractor, I've had several roles within my company. Alright, most of these roles I was sitting there by myself without anyone to train me, and they would tell me, we don't have time to train you. You're going to have to sink or swim. And I always came up on top. So they tend to use me as a one person in the company with over 150 people there. I'm normally the one person they would send off by himself into those type of projects because I always come up on top. Now let me tell you why that's the case. It comes from confidence. It's not arrogance, because I was a person who was not confident growing up. And I'm still working on some areas. But I'm telling you, there's a power in confidence. There's a power in that. If you step out on faith, things just come together. I can tell you about successful businesses that I've developed that came from confidence. I would go to sleep with all kinds of butterflies in my stomach because of the fear of doing something the next day for a big customer. And guess what? It came out right. It was the first time I was doing it, and I sold that service before I had to do it. And I went in there and provided the service, and guess what? It turned out okay. And if it turns out wrong, you can fix it. Okay? Then you can just fix it. So that's important. Now let me bring it back to mathematics. You may not have that immediate confidence, but at least start saying, you know what, I can do that. Come on, let's get this thing down. I know I understand this. And then guess what? You can build your confidence. How do you build your confidence? You build your confidence by doing baby steps. You do baby steps by going back to the main things about mathematics. The plus sign. What does it mean to add some numbers together? What does it mean to subtract some numbers? What does it mean to divide numbers? What does it mean to also multiply numbers? Alright? What do you mean? How do you do that? How do you multiply 7 times 6 and end up with 42? Okay? Make sure those numbers are quick for you and stuff like that you got that back in your mind in terms of how you multiply, how you divide, and understand that. And then you want to start dealing with fractions. I'm kind of running through this really quickly. Then you want to start dealing with fractions and getting comfortable with that and looking at what kind of numbers on top versus what kind of numbers on bottom. And whether, hey, if the top number is a large number and the bottom number is a smaller number, what that equates to, what that equals, is that going to be a number above 1 or below 1? And some of you guys that are math experts out there say, blah 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 blah, man, so simple. And that's the other thing right there. Let's not put down the people who are struggling with this. I've seen adults struggle with this, and it's okay. It's okay to struggle with that. Nobody's going to laugh at you. Nobody's going to make fun of you. It does not matter where you start. It only matters that you finish strong. I don't care where you started. I don't care how much you don't know. I don't care if you can't add numbers. I don't care if you say 4 plus 3 is 12 and you mess that up and you get confused. If you say 4 plus 3 is 43 and you start and you're an adult and you're ashamed, don't be ashamed about that. It does not matter where you start, and it's okay to make mistakes, but you move forward. I mean, the sharpness I have in mathematics now, it came at they call it the on the cutting edge. We also call that the bleeding edge, because there was many nights where I didn't go to sleep. I literally would solve problems all night long and would get them wrong and fill a trash can full of paper until I learned how to solve problems. Then I got to the point where I could solve a problem, that long engineering problem, on 4 pages without making a single mistake. No erase marks, because I had developed that skill so well. Okay, so that's what can be developed, but it starts off with the basics. You have to master the basics. I'll tell you this one other quick thing. When I was in the competition, that competition was the toughest competition in the country. Actually, they called it the toughest competition in the world that I had the highest scoring record in for Georgia Southern. And I also went to compete with Georgia Tech as well. MIT, Harvard, some of those other schools were typically the ones that would win those competitions. But in that, they take the top students of different colleges and universities or whatnot, and then have them compete against each other in this 8-hour exam. And what happens was there were some A students that never made a less than an A in a math class that still did not do well in the competition. The reason why is because they just simply regurgitate information. We're not trying to get you to regurgitate information. I'm one of the people that I don't have the best memory in the world. I don't memorize every single thing. I understand, I know he's talking about speaking positively, and I'm kind of speaking negatively, but I want to communicate this to you a little bit. My personality type, I'm quick to move to something else, or sometimes I might forget something. What helps me is to understand it, to understand the math so I don't have to memorize it. And it's important to understand why things are so in terms of math and the way it's logical. If you can lock in the logic, you don't have to memorize math. You don't have to memorize the sciences. Okay? And so, once you get those basics down, just practice those and get confident with them. And just keep doing them over and over and over and over and over. And then you realize, hey, I got some more confidence. I can go into bigger and better things. Then you take on algebra. You take on geometry. You take on some of those other classes. And you get good at that. Because once you master algebra, algebra is in geometry, that's the cord that runs through the other classes. When you get into calculus, it takes a lot of algebra. When you get into calculus 2, it takes a lot of algebra. As it gets further and further along, there's still more algebra. And if you understand the algebra, you're good to go. If you understand that math, you're good to go in fluid mechanics, which is, most mechanical engineers say that's the toughest class, which for me was an easy class. All the other classes that people say are so tough in their profession in terms of engineering, even at Georgia Tech, one of the top schools in the country or whatever, it does not matter. If you have a strong math background that you've developed, that's going to be simple to you. And whatever goal you set for yourself, you can achieve. And then, guess what? This mindset also carries into other areas. There's some folks who are adults right now that's been running from math and running from other areas for so long, they lose confidence in other areas, and they kind of breed lack of confidence. And their kids have lack of confidence, and it breeds more lack of confidence. You've got to get past that point. Alright, now I'm ministering to myself as well, because guess what? In terms of business and the business development, there's some things I'm working on right now for myself to improve in that area, in terms of my own confidence. So I'm taking these notes for myself as well. I thank you. I'm glad I had a chance to spend this time with you. Hope you have a chance to benefit from it. That's it.